One lovely picture taken from the summit of Wales, the summit of Yr Wyddfa, which is the highest point in Wales. In the bottom left we have, if I can get the Welsh accent right, Llyn Llydaw, which is a reservoir. South of it is the main feature, if you like, this long ridge with a very steep northern face and a much gentler southern face. Why? Glaciation. See, the northern face, the southern side gets direct sunlight and gets warmed, and the northern side doesn't. So the northern side is much more subject to freezing, ice freezing and then melting a little and dribbling down into cracks in the rocks, and freezing again breaks rocks off. This creates this craggy near cliff, or even in some places genuine cliff on the north side. Around the south there is freezing on far fewer nights of the year, and you get this much gentler slope with much more stuff growing on it. There is a very obvious pale stripe coming up this. From the right, about a fifth of the way up the image, there is that pale stripe that goes in the image horizontally left. It's obviously actually coming up the hill towards the camera, and then doubles back to the right in between the patches of rocks and has that kink where it wanders around what must have been a difficult spot, and then to the left onto the ridge, kind of halfway between that little half dome, you could call it, and the viewpoint. And then it comes along just to the right, just to the south of the ridge, rather than walking right on the edge of the cliff, because hikers aren't all stupid enough to walk on the cliff. Most of them have more sense. They stay just a little way back from it, so you end up with a path there. And in the distance, beyond that, we have a whole lot of rocks. It's Wales, you get hills and rocks. You see the shadows are being cast right to left, confirms we are looking approximately southeast. And there, over to the right, there's one. I have to zoom in quite a bit to, yeah. One hill, not too far away, which is very obviously lit from the right, and very obviously has this big scoop out of its northern side. I'll come back to that. And there are signs of human habitation beyond it there to the left. That valley has been agricultured. Forests on the far side of a valley, more hills, and this lovely skyline all the way across. Except there where it kind of seems to be lost in clouds. It's Wales. There's always going to be part of it buried in the clouds. It's never really clear. I mean, the sky is never completely clear. It is clear that it's Wales. In fact, I can show you exactly which part of Wales it is. Like I said, Yr Wyddfa, the summit of the highest point in all of England and Wales combined, in fact. It's over 1,000 metres. It's a genuine mountain. From that trig point, on top of a giant cairn on top of the mountain, well above the station and east of it, you can look over this quite steep slope to your southeast to a path. Now here we have short, thin, black dashes from this footbridge up by Cwm Dili in the northeast on the shore of that reservoir. You can see them coming south up the ridge, then up the west side of the ridge, kind of, and then diagonally up across the slope onto the crest. Southwest along the crest where it says trial level and Llywedd Bach, and up to the 807 metre spot height there, up onto the crest and along. There is a path up there. That path continues along the crest and then goes west to climb at an angle up the slope south of the summit rather than going directly up to the summit, because the way up to the summit is kind of steep. Those are 10 metre contour lines, and the big blue squares are a 1 kilometre grid. That is pretty steep. That path that's going along south of the summit and along the crest away from it, and then makes a sharp right turn to descend the slope between rocks, and goes south and away from the summit, and then doubles back to go downhill but towards the summit, and then kinks again to go south away from the summit. It's marked Watkin Path. It has the short black dashes saying there is a visible path on the ground, which we saw in the photograph. It also has short fat green dashes indicating a public right-of-way footpath, which says you have the legal right to walk there. And there are other dashes like that all over the place. There are in fact long dashes over the summit, indicating you have the legal right to ride a bicycle or a horse there, which would be fairly bold, fairly... it would display an adventurous spirit. But we have this line anyway, going across the crest, where it says West Peak and East Peak. West Peak is the higher. This measure distance line goes right across it. And it is a day bearing of 128.05 degrees, which is, well, 128.0 is the one with the minus 4.5 degrees next to it at the top centre. 128.5 is the one to the right of that. 129 is the next one right above the Carnev of Mynydda Carnev Hywel. So just to the right of the line that's marked for, just to the right of the vertical line next to where it says minus 4.5, in fact under the actual text minus 4.5 degrees, we see Heathmund, or Mind, or however you pronounce that. Maybe it's Heathmund, I don't know, I don't speak Welsh. Has a line down which is pretty much 128.05 degrees, which is the bearing of that line. And as you can see, Peak Finder, even from 20 kilometres above Erlitha, does not think you can see as far as the Channel, never mind into France. Yeah, see, Taboo Conspiracy took that image from the actual photographer's video and claimed that he could see the French Alps in it. I'll give you a moment to think about that claim. You know, and then maybe I'll go back to the actual image, and say, where? Where are the French Alps? You wanna know where he thinks you can see the French... Well, says, not necessarily thinks. Quite possibly doesn't think at all, ever. That he can see the French Alps. There. World record long distance photograph. French Alps from Wales. According to Taboo Conspiracy. I didn't much fancy trusting stretching out the line in Bing. It's not the best way to do it. Google lets you actually grab the end of the line and stretch it, and then adjust it, and stretch it some more and adjust it as necessary. The Bing line got me as far as, I think it was Worcester. Using that, I got this line in Google Maps using the satellite view. As you can see, you have that crest, 1.5 to 1.8 kilometres, or 1.4 to 1.8 kilometres from the viewpoint, which is at 0 at the summit. You have the crest that's very obvious in the view, and you can sight along that and over Gunant down here and across into the distance. 161 kilometres to Worcester. 1,161 kilometres now. Change of distance in that little box at the bottom. So I'll just tweak the zoom to make sure you can see that. Snowdon is at the top left. The path is the obvious pale path. Yes, the obvious pale path in the photograph is the obvious pale path in the satellite photograph. No surprise there. Along the crest and wiggling down between the rocks, then diagonally down the slope away from the viewer and slightly off to the right, and it goes pretty much to the right down the slope before it hooks around the bottom to Gladstone Rock. That line of sight is going along the crest that was the centre of the photograph and off into the distance to the southeast. Its other end, 1,161 kilometres away, its other end is all the way down here on a mountain called Egginer, which happens to be nicely lined up behind that crest. So, hey, exactly behind that crest there is a big snow-covered mountain. There's also one called Hoogwachter, which may or may not actually mean Hogwatch, but I thought it was amusing. You have this ski resort in the Alps. It's great. So, you know, looking in this direction from Wales, someone took a photograph and Taboo Conspiracy looked at it and said, hey, you can see the French Alps from Wales. So, bit of a problem with that claim there. There's this big green area labelled France. Northeast of it is an area labelled Belgium, and southeast of Belgium is an area labelled Luxembourg, and north of Belgium is an area that's labelled Rotterdam and Amsterdam, not actually labelled the Netherlands, even though it should be. East of them, and of part of France, is a big area labelled Germany. Southwest of the south part of Germany and east of the middle of France is an area labelled Switzerland. Yeah, and that line goes across France and then into Switzerland and then into the Alps in Switzerland. And if you extend it any farther, it goes into Italy. The French Alps are the Alps that are in France. They're west of the border between France and Switzerland. And this line is well east of that border before it gets to the Alps. So that's a bit of a failure right there. But wait, there's more. See, I put the same line into Google Earth, the one that lets you get nice 3D views and various angles. Or, from way off the line if you're trying to fake it to make the coast of Crete kind of match a cloud bank that someone photographed from Israel. That's the same line in Google Earth. Isn't it pretty? It's a yellow line with a blob at each end and a smaller blob in the middle. It's in the same places. Here is the view along that line from probably over the French-Swiss border, approximately, looking towards the Swiss Alps in the distance. Matterhorn. I mean, Crête du Cervelet is French. Sure, Le Chasseron, that's a French name. Le Suchet, French name. Matterhorn is not a French name. Should have been a clue. All those umlauts that were in the earlier image. Not really very French. There's what the Alps actually look like from that direction. Okay. Not quite like what we were seeing in the photograph. Not quite. If I step back a bit, two things happen. One is the skyline changes. Well, three things. The labels change because different things are close enough to be considered worth labeling. The skyline changes because I'm farther away now and perspective is a thing. And the view gets kind of hazy because there are a shitload of people living in France and in northern Switzerland, and they operate motor vehicles. Amazing, I know. Some of them have barbecues too. Yep. Believe it or not, that technology was invented before any white guys ever saw the Americas. Texas didn't invent the barbecue. There's your crest line from somewhere in France. In fact, you can see the Saône down there, which very much confirms you're above France, because that is a very French river. And I zoomed out a little bit more. Just pull back a little bit farther. Just a little bit. And the Alps are there somewhere in the distance. There's Zurich marked. Lucerne. Those are Swiss. Freiburg im Breisgau. That's not a very French name. Strasbourg, right on the French-German border. Stuttgart, in Germany. Saarbrücken, that's a German name, isn't it? Basel, that's Swiss. Genève, if you're French. Ghent, if you're German. Geneva, if you're English. Maybe also Italian, I don't know. It's just in Switzerland, but it's pretty close to the French border. And then Romilly-sur-Seine and Grenoble, they're in France. And way across here, Nevers and Vichy, French. And somewhere along the horizon there, somewhere, are the Alps. Kind of, in theory. The actual location here was the mouth of the Somme. Vertically above, there you go, Bray-sur-Somme, where that river comes down through Corbie and Amiens, out into the English Channel. This view is from vertically above it. Shout out to Science It Out, who has simulated the view from the summit of Ruithar, looking over that crest. This one is using the globe model. He didn't say whether this was with or without refraction. This is, therefore, it's an altitude data set downloaded from the web, and a thing that simulates a path of ray until it hits the ground, and then colour codes it based on which way the ground is facing, which is where you get the lights and shadows on it. And you can see it has the crest with the steep north side and the gentle south side. Obviously it doesn't show the path, that's not in the data file. It has the sort of the gentle ridge going south around which the path wraps. It's got that crest going to the north from its far end up which the other path climbs. The lake isn't shown as a lake, but it is shown as a flattish area, an area of flat colour. Flattish, not flat. Don't get overexcited. And if I zoom in and come up to here, you can see that previously mentioned hill with the big scoop taken out of its north side. And then this skyline, which is a pretty good match for what's seen in the photograph. This guy's done a pretty good job of creating a program that models what you're going to see in a photograph. He also has a version of this program that assumes the Earth is flat, and that's the view you get there. I think this is with a refraction because the purple line across the image is probably an eye level indicator, and refraction is what is making things appear significantly above eye level. Yes, the Alps are taller than Wales, but all this green stuff in between, the blue bit is the English Channel. And in fact, the blue bit at the very top edge there may well be the Mediterranean. The blue band between France and England is the English Channel, or La Manche Bleue if you're French. Narrow bit over there. Oh, can't actually see it just there. Presumably the Straits of Dover, and across to the left the North Sea. Blue stripe below the pink line could be the Thames, and then that could even be the wash between Lincolnshire and Norfolk on the left, but don't quote me on that, I haven't checked. And this view, if Earth was flat you would see, does have this long thin strip of Alp, which is colour-coded grey and white, I think based on altitude rather than which way it's facing or anything, or any data about actual average snow cover. So that is what you would expect to see if Earth was flat. That is what you expect to see if Earth is a globe. Okay. One more line on Google Earth. This is a line from Uwatha, but instead of going across west of Bern in Switzerland and almost into Italy, in the actual Alps over there, the bit that you really think of as Alps, all the snow cover and the ski resorts and stuff, or into what you might think of as the French Alps, like near Chamonix. This one's going, Val d'Isère I think is there somewhere, that might be right under Parc National de la Vanoise, that valley might be the Isère. This one's going off into the Mediterranean across the westernmost bit, west of the Rhone. The last little bit that might possibly be mistaken for an Alp is this line. It's just there, that bit between Grenoble and Valence. You can call Valence the west edge of the Alps if you really want to, but this is all fairly low and gentle stuff. The bits that look like they might be visibly snowy are farther east. I think Grenoble's used for skiing sometimes, or used to be back when we had snow. That line, as seen from Uwatha, probably some Welshman going absolutely nuts at me for getting it wrong in the exact same way every time. In which case I'm sorry. It goes up there. It goes over that hill. So the farthest west, even if Earth is flat, the farthest to the right you would see the Alps in that view would be that hill. which is kind of hard to pick out on the weird, if Earth was flat you would see this view from Science Stout, because it doesn't look like the photograph that much, you know. But we know it's to the left of the one with the obvious scoop, so we can guess it's kind of maybe this hill. And oh yeah, look, the Alps do indeed end there. They are to the left of that hill. There is no visible Alp to the right of it. There's certainly no visible Alp directly above the hill with the big scoop taken out of it in the centre there, or anywhere to the right of that. The little grey and white stripe you can see on the right edge of the screen, this bit over here on the right, that's the Pyrenees. Yeah. Because, you know, without curve you'd be able to see that far. So here's this line saying, you know, the Alps are west of this line. And you would certainly not be seeing the Alps above or anywhere to the right of the hill with the scoop taken out of its northern side. Nope. But wait! There's more! You see, we have that line, we have that hill with that scoop taken out of its northern side. It's right here, isn't it? Google Earth, while I'm here, we can look to the right of that line and see this hill, scoop taken out of the northern side. Little ridge sticking off to the north. Gentle ridge to the west, gentle ridge to the northeast, gentle ridge to the south-southeast, and this reservoir on its east side with a dam across its east. Fairly round lake with a very straight north-south dam on its eastern side, above a long slope down to a valley with another lake in it. At Tanigrisio. Okay, and Festiniog down there. You may have heard of Festiniog. Well, it's west of Festiniog and it's got that shape and it's above that lake. Back to the Ordnance Survey maps. Tanigrisio. There's the Festiniog railway up there. You can just see the F bit on the right and most of the blue train symbol. That long lake with that kind of blobby shape is there in the bottom right, and up the hill west of it is a roundish lake with a long straight dam on its east side, east of a peak with a gentle ridge off to the west, a ridge to the north, a ridge to the east-northeast, and that long ridge going south and then south-southwest. And you can see the craggy edge of the scoop taken out of the north side of it. So we have our hill, and I've added a measurable distance line from that hill going off north-northwest. Where does it go? Well, obviously it goes to Irwithvat, doesn't it? Back to Snowdon. Right there on the summit. We have two lines, one that goes over West Peak, that very obvious crest in the centre of the photograph, and one that goes down to the hill with the scoop out of its north side. From this screenshot, you'll notice in the screenshot that the Ordnance Survey's grid isn't aligned straight up and down, straight across the screen. Because the website that presents these maps is presenting them with true north, straight up and down the screen, wherever you are. Which means if you actually try to go across copy-pasting to produce a huge image from the website, and rather than buying the map, it doesn't work too well because the rotation keeps changing. Because the grid is designed to be 1 kilometre between intersections, which means it can't quite be perfectly square, and it certainly can't be pointing grid north aligned with true north everywhere. But rather than measuring to the grid, which is what you have to do when you're using a compass and a paper map to navigate, on a screenshot we can measure the angle from straight across the screen to there, and then add 90 degrees to get the angle from true north to that line, which is how I got the bearing 128.05 degrees for the first line of sight. Well, I can get a bearing the same way for the second one, can't I? Is 151.5? Yes, there it is. In the bottom left, we see that crest. This is the same photograph, I just cut it down a bit. That crest in the photograph, where our line of sight is at 1 to 8.05 degrees, marked in the top left. Over on the right, we have the hill with the scoop out of its north side. There's a line up from its summit, 151.50 degrees. Now, these are not necessarily pixel perfect lineups, right? This is give or take a few pixels, you know, give or take 0.02 degrees. So this isn't a perfect, 18 decimal place accurate calculation, but 33.45 degrees between them, and it's 1,425 pixels between them, which is 0.02347 degrees per pixel, or 42.60 pixels per degree. Egginer, I seem to have missed out the third G. Maybe it is called Egginer. It might be called Egginer, and I just called it Egginer incorrectly just now. Anyway, that mountain in Switzerland, the one somewhere down that line of sight over that crest, and all the way across England and the Cotswolds or whatever, and across most of France and northern Switzerland and into the Alps, it is 1,163 kilometres away. According to the Google Earth measuring tape, it might have been just 1,161 on Google Maps. So maybe one's doing surface and one's doing straight line, or one's doing an arc and one's doing a chord. Anyway, at that distance, at 42.60 pixels per degree, 0.02347 degrees per pixel, if you take the tangent of 0.02347 degrees, or the sine, they're pretty much the same thing when the angle is that small, and multiply it by 1,163 kilometers, you get 476.5 meters per pixel. The size, the actual pixel size at a distance of from Iwethvar to Egginer is 476.5 meters. Again, approximately. Which means those 34 pixels there, just there, not all the way down to what is very clearly a skyline below, what is actually part of Wales as predicted by Science It Out's software. Just the top bit where it's pale, never mind the stuff below, is 34 pixels, which will be 16,200 meters of visible height. Just for the record, that's getting close to twice the total height of Mount Everest, which is quite a bit taller than the highest peak in Europe. So, Taboo Conspiracy, I hereby award you 1 derp.